Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our latest Meet the Management podcast. My name is Marc Ashton, and today I'm joined by Keith McLachlan. Keith is the CEO of Element Investment Managers, and we're going to be talking a little bit about equity research in South Africa. It's a topic that's quite close to my heart. Keith, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, good to be here, Mark.
And Keith, maybe just to start off, a little bit about who Element are. I mean, I know they've gone through a couple of different iterations over the last couple of years, but kind of who are they? What do they service? And kind of areas of speciality?
Absolutely. I'll keep it really, really simple. Element's got a long, rich history. It includes launching arguably the first Sharia compliant unit trust in South Africa. But over those 20 years, where we've arrived at now is Element Investment Managers is a long only fundamental based investor that manages 7 unit trusts. 3 Sharia unit trusts being local, global, and balanced, and 4 non-Sharia, i.e. traditional unit trusts being local, global, balanced, and effectively a defensive balanced or low equity balanced.
Excellent. I mean, I think it has been, I know looking at its history, it's always been one of those innovators in the space. One of the questions that we're looking to unpack today is the state of equity research in South Africa. I think, we have a listed universe of about 280 domestic stocks, and I think at last count, only 22 of them are actually covered by rated analysts at any point in time. It amazes me that we have such a shallow pool of investment research, and I'm sure that there are a couple of structural reasons for that as well. Starting off, I mean, what are your thoughts about the state of equity research in South Africa? Is it something that we simply let go and it's just not something we invest in? Or do you think there's an opportunity sitting there both for the businesses themselves, but also for the analyst community?
So, Mark, good question, and I'll lead with a conclusion. The state of equity research in South Africa is poor. It's at quite a trough. It's no comment on the analysts involved. There's some spectacular analysts, but we need to kind of kick back about 10 odd years to really understand how we arrived at this point. Out of Europe, there was legislation written called MiFID II that separated brokerage from research, and one wasn't allowed to bundle those things in together. You had to separately charge for it. Now, the intention might have been for transparency, but the outcome of the legislation has been a collapse in the small and mid cap and sell side research houses out of Europe, but the rest of the world kind of followed, and that's created a massive problem where the big houses have been able to buy the analysts up, but they keep the research for themselves on the buy side. There's been some independent houses that have started and stopped and have really struggled to do that. And ultimately, if you have a look at the period of significant underperformance of small and mid cap stocks around the world, it is strangely correlated to the MiFID II legislation being released. Now, all of that's happening in the background affected our market, where there used to be much bigger sell-side houses. There are less of them. There's still some very, very good ones, and there's some thriving teams, but there's far less sell-side houses, far less brokers in South Africa. And they haven't just been fighting this challenge. They've also been fighting the local JSE that's been shrinking. So there's less things to cover. The volume's getting more and more concentrated in the top 40. And as you alluded to the fact, especially sell side research is really volume incentivized, and therefore it's going to be attracted to covering the more liquid stocks, not the less liquid, because you're paid in brokes. And therefore, why spend your time? It's the same amount of effort to cover a small company as a big company. Why spend your time on the small one? Commercially, it becomes a bit of a wilderness in terms of the traditional sell side equity analyst model.
The argument then becomes that it's self-defeating because essentially if you're not going to be covered, you're not going to attract the volumes, and you end up in the situation where the capital simply goes to where there is research being done. And ironically, we have some really interesting small caps that are out there, but they simply do not capture the attention of analysts, even the media to a large degree. I mean, we've shrunk in terms of media coverage. And I know there've been guys that have tried to innovate. You've done a couple of things in the space as well. But is it a thing that it's just too expensive to cover these stocks, or is it just that we don't think about it innovatively enough? MiFID primarily drove research in terms of those linked to the investment banking community. But you would think that there would still be the opportunity for actual independent research to be conducted. Is it just structural and it's just something where we haven't innovated, or do you think that is it something simply that we just will not be able to get right?
So what has sprung up, and it's always been in the background in the market, and a lot of people have turned their nose up to it. But what has stepped into the foreground now is the concept of sponsored research.
Mm.
And it fills that gap that the sell side independent analyst can no longer commercially fill in most instances. And sponsored research model is simple. Think about it this way. If you want to have a look at We Buy Cars, if you want to buy or sell cars, you buy billboards on the side of the road and you send out adverts and everything. Well, if you want people to look at your share, you also spend on marketing, and it's considered sponsored research. So you will go and find legitimate houses, well, hopefully legitimate houses, and good analysts, and go, listen, we would like our company covered. And you go and negotiate, hopefully not the outcome, hopefully just the price, and therefore fall part of their coverage, and that the research will get written, and therefore you will have a dot on the radar when people are looking for research on your company. So sponsored research has stepped in more into the foreground to fill that gap. And I do think it's a legitimate industry. Like any industry, there are good and bad players, but it serves a very important purpose if people understand what it's trying to achieve.
So I'll throw two questions at you, and you can decide how you want to process them or respond to them. I mean, the first one is: are companies actually prepared to invest in the sponsored research? It almost seems to sit in that PR investor comms thing, where it's a nice to do if we've got a few bucks extra every month. So is there actually the appetite for the sponsored research model? But then secondly, from the analyst side, how do you maintain independence, or is independence the wrong question to be asked? Because you're saying, well, I'm going to naturally be encouraged to write something that has a bullish outcome or becomes promotional in nature. How do you kind of navigate those two situations?
Okay, so let me start with the second one first, and we'll circle back around. I mean, I built the company Blue Gem Research, that all it does, everything Blue Gem does, is 100% sponsored research. It does not pretend to be independent, and it's on the websites and all the disclaimers that it's understood. But how does one make this a sustainable business model without reputational risk and happy clients on both sides, both in the public and in terms of sponsored research? Well, the first and starting point is select good companies. If a company is paying for research and you write bad things about them, it's not going to be a very sustainable business relationship.
Yep.
And therefore, in my opinion, if one approaches a company and says, actually, Blue Gem, we take a proactive approach. We draw up a short list. We approach the companies we want to, and we have turned companies away, and we have cancelled coverage of companies when either it hasn't been good enough or things have turned. But it's in my opinion, being proud of the company that you're running on the stock market and wanting research is a good indicator of quality. Bad companies typically don't want lights shone on them being bad. So that's the first thing. The second thing to keep independence is the way Blue Gem's structured is it's coverage for a period of time, and the company is charged upfront before the reports are published. In other words, no payment can be withheld because you're not happy with an opinion or a report published. And therefore, it's not perfect, but all research is ultimately got some degree of bias in it. But putting in these mechanisms of transparency, being selective on who one covers, and making sure that money or leverage in the relationship cannot be held over your head, hopefully arrives at not an independent outcome, but a defendable professional outcome in terms of the quality of research. So, I mean, I'm not sure that fully answers both questions, but I think that that in order to get the model to work well, we've got to be realistic about both its pros, cons, shortcomings, and risks.
And then maybe building on that as well, the question about distribution of that research. We do have a relatively small equity market. We do have a significant concentration around the top 40. But the ability to actually get that research out both domestically and ultimately would be great if it landed up in the international market. How do you go and kind of magnify or multiply that reach to be able to ensure that it actually reaches the right people and gets the story out there?
Yeah, so I mean, once again, good question. Now, there's traditional channels and there's non-traditional channels. And the traditional channels would be like the data aggregators, Bloomberg, Refinitiv, AlphaSense, various. There's a whole list of them where make sure the research distribution is plugged into those and pushed out. Some of the current sponsored research players in the market attach to brokerages, in fact, and they would, for example, push it through their brokerage where they perhaps earn on the sponsored research, but they also earn on brokes it generates on their side, and one can argue pros and cons on that, but they at least have a client base that can read it. And then there's the non-traditional channels that one can build public-facing mailing lists, one can utilize social media. I always encourage, from a blue chain perspective, I always encourage companies to put the research on their own websites.
Yeah.
Let them become part of the distribution. If you're looking at a listed company, the first thing you do is go to the investor relations web page. Red flag if you don't have one. If you do have one, go have a look at the research and then go and it's right there. And you can both see the company presentation and their results, and you can see an analyst view of it. It adds a lot. So there's lots of ways to get it out there. It all really depends on both the sponsored research house, how it does it, and the listed company, how they prefer it done.
And then lastly, I mean, we're looking to always highlight best practices. I mean, in terms of looking at this local market, any companies that particularly stand out for you in terms of their shareholder engagement, and both at a retail level, but also coming back to the kind of institutional professional level, any kind of standouts that you could say these guys kind of get investor communications for research purposes?
So I would say from a retail level, Purple Capital, that ultimately holds Easy Equities, is an excellent example of retail engagement. Charles Savage especially has been very almost entrepreneurial. I'm not sure. I don't think that's the right word, but wonderfully innovative. Yes, wonderfully engaging with the retail community. So that's a good example. And on some of the smaller company side, perhaps one that stands out, in my opinion, from institutional engagement has been Afrimat. Andries van Heerden has done the hard yards of lots and lots of presentations, lots and lots of analyst meetings, literally roadshows to see people after every set of results, every 6 months, going out there and doing it again and getting to know everyone. And he's got a wonderful saying that back in the day when he first brought Afrimat to analysts and sat in front of them, the analysts would pick the company apart and find this problem and that problem. And he started listening to it and started realizing that this is effectively free business consulting advice. And he's like, you know what, guys, we need to focus on this problem, this problem, and this problem, and this problem. And they went and fixed that, and it made Afrimat a better company. So it's actually the engagement, both with public and with analysts, is a two-way street. It's not just presenting your story, it's hearing that criticism back. That's also quite important.
Keith, really appreciate the insights. I think it's definitely given us food for thought. Definitely going to carry on this topic. I think it is something that we really want to be able to drive in the local market. And I think that if we are able to elevate and get into the international market, I think we all end up as net winners. Keith McLachlan, Element Investment Managers, thank you very much for your time, and looking forward to chatting again next time. Thanks, Keith.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.